All right, who's ready for the next good tutorial on Revit? Today we are going over material and project takeoffs from the Revit model. So this was kind of a topic that was brought up and asked about doing. We haven't done a whole lot yet regarding being able to do a lot of these takeoffs, but that's one of the primary goals of BIM, right? Of Revit and modeling and all this stuff, to be able to do takeoffs, to be able to do materials and quantity takeoffs, all that stuff. So even though that's a lot more kind of a larger part and scope of the general contractor, we're finding more and more that they're asking us for numbers, and especially if it's stuff that, as we're doing our preliminary budgets and for the clients, and making sure that we're in a good position. Of course, what that always means is having to bid out or having to reduce our scope by 40% on every project. But today, just starting off, this is a small project, a little cottage that we did here. You probably recognize it. I've used it several times in these reviews just because it's small and there's a lot of information in it. But this project was not set up to do material takeoffs, to do bidding and cost analysis and things like that. So I wanted to use it because of that reason, because it hasn't been set up to do those things. The majority of the projects we do here are not taken to that level because it can become time consuming, as well as, we're not being paid to do it. So we're going to go over kind of some of the basic principles, some of the broad concepts of being able to add and input the information in there. But you'll find really it's just going to be a series of small topics such as schedules, materials, families, things like that. So when you talk about being able to do a takeoff, being able to do a cost base for anything, what it's doing is it's drawing from the model elements. It has to draw that information from the model element, which means you have to put it in the model elements. If you don't have the model element up to snuff or up to the degree that is required for this information, then you don't get it. I mean, it's just plain and simple. So when someone says doing cost analysis or takeoffs, really you're just breaking it down to a series of tasks within Revit. Input the information, do a schedule, go to the material, make sure it reads properly. I mean, it's not as in depth, I think, as most people who don't use Revit really understand, which might be good because then we can charge more, right? Any questions or anything before I get rolling here and put you to sleep? All right. So this is, again, just a small project. It's a little cottage, 2-bedroom little thing. Had this whole underground, we'll call it a storage room for the clients. Had a full basement and all that stuff. If I look at this in realistic mode, we were originally looking at it as design-wise that it's going to be all stone exterior with wood. There's obviously the concrete foundation, slate tile roof, lots of heavy timbers because the construction of it is heavy timber construction. So you can see all of the timbers and the family that's been made. Now, right off the bat, if I were to look at this family, you see that it's parametric and it has the information. You can change sizes, you can do things like that, but no information has been filled out in the identity data as far as cost, as far as anything goes. So even if you're looking at this, if you want to do any of the cost analysis, one of the first questions you have to ask is, to what level of development are we taking this cost analysis? Because theoretically, here, this size of this heavy timber truss wouldn't need either the vertical or the collar tie. So I can't, here in the family, I would have to break it out into different types with visibility, right? Turn off the collar tie. The cost of that family type would be separate than the cost of the truss with the collar tie in it, right? Because more wood. So if I look at these things and say, okay, right now, this visibility parameter, upper collar tie, when I go into that, the upper collar tie says the word default next to it, meaning that it's an instance parameter. Now look at that, it's instance. So when you're using an instance parameter, it's only going to have the checkbox in the properties to turn it on and off. So this family right now is not set up to have that capability of being able to set the type and find the cost per type of that. Does that make sense? So that's when I say that there is, excuse me, you have to take into consideration the model elements and how they're generated to be able to do a lot of this stuff. So if I go back into my project here, I'm going to turn it off of realistic so it will actually move quickly. So again, it's the heavy timber. We have the slate roof, another expensive element. We have the full stone exterior, and this was actual stone, so it was, minimum of 4 inches thick, built up. So there's a lot of information here. If I go down in the project browser, right now I've cleaned out pretty much everything except for these 3 schedules. There's a material takeoff that if I were to open this up and look, you'll see something like the ST1, which hasn't been filled in yet. But let's say that someone throw out a number for stone per square foot.
$20.
$20 a square foot. Holy cow, Steve. Oh, I don't have permission to. I realized that I opened this and created a new local, but I didn't detach from central, so it's giving me that error. Steve really likes expensive stone.
Hey, no ain't cheap.
Nothing but the best.
He's got a crown now, he thinks he's just all the best materials.
Right. Okay, so going into the material takeoff here. Come in and say, okay, the cost per square foot is $20. Everything is sorting. So according to this material takeoff schedule, just these materials, which are the concrete, the slate roof, the stone, the exterior tile that was at the curbs and planter areas, the heavy timber, and then the wall battens. All of this stuff is going to cost $145,000 just for the materials. And it's Revit, so it's all instant. So if we begin to change this from $20 down to $15, then you see everything update and all that. So this material takeoff was simply, it's just a schedule. So I come over, I right click on scheduled quantities, and there is its own thing here, new material takeoff. Come in here, you name it whatever you want to name it. And it's multi-category, so it's pulling from everything. So if you wanted to do one that's just showing wall covering, then you can just tell it to select walls here. You can tell it to do just ceilings. You can do all those different things. If we're doing a material takeoff for just the exterior finishes on elevations, maybe you'd want to be able to filter out your schedule by just the exterior finishes, so you just need the walls, or maybe your walls and a roof or something like that, depending on what you have. Multi-category will get everything. Once you do that, you, like any other schedule, you pick which fields or which columns you want to show. In this case, I pulled over these from the material, including the area, right? So any area that's being used, this material is being used on, it's going to populate and calculate that area. And then there's this one named total that's just a calculated value, tells it to take the material area times the material cost. Right, very straightforward, very simple. Couple more setup items with these type of things. The filter, I'm filtering it by the mark, so it lists it all there. And then I am not itemizing by every instance. You could get down to each individual element and component and see how much it's going to cost you. But typically if you're saying, well, let's just see how much it's going to cost me in drywall. How much drywall do I need to buy? You can go through and use this method. Any questions about like setting this up? I don't want to go too deep into just schedules, but it's a big part of doing this. We had our schedules lesson whenever that was, a month ago or so. So we do have a recording, so if you need to brush up on how to generate schedules and work on that, we have that. It's up on the wiki site. So some of the other things that you can do, again, with the building information model is quantity, right? Quantity takeoffs. So in this project, there was actually some TJIs or eye joists, floor eye joists. And on the sheet, there was a schedule for the framing that will say what the element is, the size of it, the length, and cut length, and then how many of them there are. So again, this is all pulling from the building model. So instead of my building model having, let me come down here, I'm going to isolate the category here. So instead of the building model having just a floor that was put in there, in lieu of the floor, I actually went in and put in all the beams, right? Revit beams, in this case, eye joists, so that we could then do that takeoff. And I had to put them in and make sure that they were, rather than running all the way across here, you see that they're actually broken at the support beam, and put them in as though they were actually being built in the field. That way I could get the total length and the cut length for the TJIs or eye joists, so that it will populate this out correctly. And as it comes down, you can see that it'll list things like the plywood web joist. It'll give the size of them, and then it sorts it by the cut length or by the total length. And it allows it to say, okay, I need one at this size, one at this size, one at this length.
Why are some of the lengths blank?
The question is, why is some of the lengths blank? So if we were to look at this, highlight and model. So with these selected, coming over to here, you see that it's showing up as blank in here. I think it might be because it's joining with something, or maybe not. Oh. Well, that's interesting. So it's blank because it had two different values, so it was leaving it blank. But why is it counting them together then?
Because if they're different lengths, it should be two separate lines, right?
Right.
Is it because the cut length is the same?
That may be. So here you can see that the grip, let me turn on my thin lines, the grip for this is at the face of this rim joist, whereas with this one, the grip is to the center of the rim joist. So in that schedule, maybe I wouldn't need to include the length, but I would need the cut length only. I don't know why I had the length in there. And then that would alleviate that issue. But yeah, you look down here and the cut length is different, but yet it's grouping them all together. I don't know what's going on there. Which of course leads right into the whole, so when you're doing this, yeah, see, look, this one's a totally different length, but yet it's grouping it with the rest.
Is it in a beam system?
Nope, it's not in a beam system.
Well, the length, is the length on there the length of the piece you need in order to, what's the length even showing? Because you have the length and the cut length. What's
So,
the setup?
so the length is in the Revit system family where it says this would be the overall length, and then you'd end up from grip to grip. The cut length would then be the grip to grip minus the setbacks. So
So the length really doesn't tell you anything.
right, I think the length is in there because it's in there for everything, like a wall and everything else. But I'm not sure. Apart from that, I'm not sure what else the length really itself really gives you. But I haven't seen this before where it groups together these ones that are actually a separate length.
What are the filters in the table for the sorting grouping?
So when it comes in here, it's just filtering out by the ones that I've checked this box, told to be there. And then it's just sorting by the mark.
So it's grouping them by mark. Because I was looking at your framing.
That's what it was. I had the wrong mark.
14, and there was one of those ones numbered 14 that was
Yep.
short.
So that one should actually be 13. There you go. There you go. Now it's filling in. So in here, I would probably take length out. Get this schedule filled in. So, I mean, obviously you see it's not safe from user error, having the wrong one in there. And that's, I think, one of the biggest cautions that I wanted to make sure to say today is you cannot assume that you're going to get the right information out. Just like every door schedule, you don't just say, okay, include the doors and list it and then go. You still have to go back and double check and make sure that everything's filling out properly. You may have noticed Revit has little buttons all over the place and little check marks and little boxes to fill in, and if you miss one, it throws it off. Or in this case, I had an extra one selected, assigned to the wrong mark. Or it may have been that other wall had moved slightly. So at one point it was a number 14. Then the wall shifted and all that other stuff, and then that one little number forgot to be changed, and it threw it off. So especially when you're doing things like material takeoffs, quantity takeoffs, those are the numbers that have been specifically asked for. The contractor's probably going to double check, but at the same time, especially for liability purposes, you don't want the contractor saying, hey, give me this. You tell them you need 20 of them. They buy 20 of them. They need 24. Now all of a sudden, they only need 18. Now they want you to pay for the rest. Okay, so quantity takeoffs, again, it's just a schedule, right? You begin the schedule, you show that information. If we wanted to, we could come further in here, go and look in the fields. And, oh, I went down too, I don't know why I was looking down there for the cost. You could add cost in. And then the cost for the elements, I don't know what a precast hull core plank goes for, $500. Plywood web joists, I don't know, $30. So it changes the type, so notice it puts it in for all of them. Lumber, I don't know, $16. So again, it'll come down, and then you can just simply say that you want that cost column to calculate the total. It'll come down and give you that information. So the primary tool for doing all this stuff is schedules. So you have to really make sure that you understand how schedules work, how they pull their information. If I need to come into here and include elements that are linked from a Revit model, maybe if I'm doing light fixture count and they're coming in through the MEP model, you have to make sure that's checked. So to really actively do these, you need to make sure that you understand all the ins and outs of the schedule, and then understand that you have to go back and double check. Any questions about that? Or comments or examples or? So what are some examples that we've used either in the office or that you think might be used other than structural framing and material?
Well, I think it's a good way to, I was thinking that one of the difficulties too is you're only getting as good information out as you put into it. So you're only going to get as accurate of a number as you spend time making sure you have all your materials and modeling set up properly and things like that. But there are some things, like I think almost one of the biggest things we can use that for is doing a comparative, like, internal analysis, right? So if we want to say, hey, we got option A and B and C for you and for a client, or hey, or the client says, oh, what happens if we just like cut out, this? What if we don't renovate that room? Like, how does that impact things? I think it's a good way for us to make relative comparisons between different elements. So, like, one example could be like, let's say you had a countertop, right? And maybe that's a more difficult one because it's we do it with model in place, which is like a linear family, but or flooring would be a really good example. Like what if they said, well, what if you had you're carpeting a whole area, your carpet costs this much, and then you've got a section that's going to be tile flooring, and that the material cost of that. You could say, well, what happens if we stop tiling here versus stop tiling over here? Like, how does the cost change? Because that's a good example of where you've got a decrease in one while the other's increasing, and it does all the arithmetic for you behind the scenes. Like, I think that'd be a great example of a way you could use it.
Yeah, and all of those are done in design options, right? So you would set your schedule, which right now there aren't any design options in here, but when you do add it, you have the option of coming through here and telling that schedule to look to a particular design option for that. So you'd end up in that case with two of these schedules. You'd get one set and created and working, you would duplicate it for the other option, and then it would tell you exactly immediately back and forth between those two. How many of us have done equipment schedules for projects here? We had like legacy concessions, had an equipment schedule in there that would give quantities. Has anybody ever done the cost side of it? So that's one thing. Again, it goes back to if that information's been put into the building model, and if it's been modeled to the utmost accuracy. The better the model, the better, more accurate information you get. So if someone wanted to say, well, how much drywall do I need to buy for my project? You can say, okay, I can go in and I can make sure the model's correct and I can make sure all the layers are set up and the cost information is in there. But of course, the building information model isn't going to take into consideration the guy in the field cutting the drywall, getting to a point where, oh, now I have 10% scrap because of the cuts and things like that. So there are still the specific nuances of construction that don't quite match. And I think that's one part of the more broad overall discussion that has to be had between us and the clients or the contractor, because they need to understand that they can't say, tell me exactly how much drywall I'm going to need on this project. You can say, we can tell you how much area of drywall you're going to have in the project at the end, but we don't tell them how much they have to buy. Is that clear? That kind of distinction between the two? But of course, that means we have to understand and know and tell them about it in advance.
Yeah, it's probably also a good example too for things that might be very specific, like long lead items, or like more custom installations. Because something like drywall, for example, is you can get, that's something that most contractors might know pretty easily, like what it's going to cost them roughly per square foot of area. But if we had something very specific, like we were calling out, like go back to the tile example, like and we can get the price from the Revit Virginia tile, and a lot of of times it might be able to help sell like a design and say like, well, hey, you know, like I don't want to spend all this expensive tile. And say, yeah, but you're only doing a small bathroom. You know, really, this is you're talking $500 a tile in a, you know, $40,000 renovation or something like that. So
no one's doing takeoffs off this. What's going to happen is the way I'm going to use it, which is the person that's going to use this right away, is I need to know lineal footage of a particular wall type. And what I do is I take that wall type and I do an average lineal foot cost based on, you tell me I've got it at, or I can do square footage cost for that wall type. Doesn't matter. Point is, you give me the number of square foot or lineal foot for a wall type, I put that into my spreadsheet. You give me square footage for exterior wall envelope, I put that in my spreadsheet. I've got the spreadsheets that will have cost points for each of those. So I don't necessarily have to have the cost point in here, but we could eventually work it in though. We could eventually go to that point, but we're not going to do that in native Revit. What we're going to do is using CostLink AE or something like that, where it'll link the unit costs that are maintained in a cost analysis application with database, with the Revit database. So like nobody's actually going into the Revit and ordering product material from Revit. They're using it for initial schematic studies. So to do cost analysis in the beginning of the project, if you tell me the amount of envelope I have, which is exactly what what's the guys that I was working with in the Galleria. And it doesn't matter. Point is, guys that are doing the cost analysis, even the engineering firm or the contracting firms, engineering firms, they're looking at square footage costs with average assemblies on the street, or average cost for that assembly on the street. So given square footages, basically it's a really glorified, quick way of getting takeoffs right now.
Yes.
And at some point, get it to the point where we're linking CostLink AE as an example with Revit, and we'll be able to just go and maintain. So if we have those standardized partition types and we use a consistent labeling and everything, we'll be able to link that with our what we understand is the current market value or cost for that partition type or that wall assembly. We'll be able to like actually get an ongoing rough analysis of what that cost is going to be.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, because once you input the information into the Revit model, it's static, right? It is what it is until you manually go in and change it. These other programs that link that information in, they're constantly being updated for market prices and whatnot. And so that stuff gets updated. And like Andrew said, it gives you kind of a static schematic of here's what it is and how it works.
But you guys need to be really careful when you're putting together your schedule. So if like, somebody like myself or Eric or Aaron or Robert are doing a cost opinion, we got to know that we're getting the right linear footage of stuff. We got to even know that we're getting the right square footage of whatever it is, drywall, soffit, or whatever. So we may end up with like a bunch of spreadsheets. Right now, even Eric is just printing them out. Eric Ward would just print out the drawings rather. He's just scaling up. He's doing takeoffs the old-fashioned way. I was trying to create some for some of the major assemblies. I was doing. I was actually having. I think it was Anna. Somebody was creating actual schedules for me based on particular wall types, and as people were providing me perimeter and things like that. It was all coming right out of Revit. So as the design changed, I could quickly update.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, probably the most beneficial in the immediate for when we're working on projects, is being able to get that information out quickly and accurately. But again, it goes back to as long as that information is correctly input into the model. So if you have walls that overlap, it's looking at that and having a bunch of different information it may throw a little bit of the numbers off.
It would be good to start to develop some level of, standard sort of takeoff schedules that could be just, so very quickly you could get those lineal footages without having to rebuild these schedules every time. So I think every time we've ever done it, we've just done it from scratch every time. Partition types, it's an easy one to just have a lineal footage or square footage probably for partition types at this point, because of the fact that the heights can change, right? I mean, even though we call it partition type SA, it's the SA and SC could very well be the same height in the model, right? So something to think about. Maybe not. Maybe that would work. Maybe you just do give me lineal footage of SA, and then you tell me ceiling heights. And if I know ceiling heights, then I know how tall SA is, right? Anyways,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the kind of thing that gets confusing with these particular things, because you might be using SA in your model, and it might be extended to deck. So if you give me square footage of SA, it's going to be a completely bad number, right? So SA should only go to 8 foot. You might have it going up 12 foot. So now it throws my costs off.
Yeah, yeah, and that goes back to
Garbage in.
how it's modeled, right? So if you go through and you're saying the intent is that this wall goes and stops 6 inches above the ceiling, but you actually have it modeled up to deck, and you don't know it's modeled up to deck, that number that you're producing isn't accurate. So that's pretty much as far as the discussion on that goes. Wanted to have a couple of other topics that are not related to the material takeoffs. One is we're going to be putting together a Revit board, library board, I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but it'll be a board, a central location. Right now we're doing a big push trying to get our library pushed forward, right? We're trying to get that going. We're opening it up to others to help me get detail items created and library content up to date and things like that. So, which in turn boosts everybody's production. But in order for us not to just sit and spin our wheels or be putting our efforts in areas that aren't in immediate need, we need some central location. It's going to be like a board similar to our project list board out there that you can just write on a post-it note, I need this element or I need this item. And whether it's broken down into categories or types or whatever the case may be, if you need a particular detail that you're looking for, then you can write it up on there. We can make sure Eric is going to be doing the details, make sure that that gets taken into, incorporated into the library, a particular family, and then someone else needs that same family, so that we notice there's like 2 or 3 post-its of that need, then we know, jump on that one first and do that in higher priority. But it's something that is going to need an active effort from everybody. So we're going to be looking at putting it in a highly visible location so that people can see it and constantly. It just means stopping every now and then to kind of see what's up there and add. Because the intent is that you can say, someone says, oh, I need, like earlier Eric was saying, a coping or a cove base detail. And so I didn't know of any project that I had done it on. And so he can recreate it, but then someone might say, oh, well, I did one in this other project. We already have that. But that's, if you don't know someone's looking for it, you don't know to say it, right? So the idea is to get it much more visible, much more vocal, and out there for everybody to see. But it's something that means everybody has to actively be remembering to look. So that's one thing. The other thing that I wanted to show, we've slightly tweaked the view title. I just want to make sure everybody sees and understands. So we have the graphic scale update, which shows the written scale in the view title as well. We've been getting questions not in the office and out of the office about reading and how to read the graphic scale. We still have the graphic scale on there because we are printing at multiple sheet sizes, and if someone's looking at it on screen versus at printed out, we need that graphic scale on there. But then adding the written scale will also help. As such, this written scale has to then also in the title block specify that the scales listed on the sheet are for this particular sheet size. So the title block that's 22 by 34 will have this text, 30 by 42 will have it listed as that these scales are for that size paper. That way someone knows that if they're holding an 11 by 17, it's not 1/8 inch, it's 16th inch. If someone prints it on 8.5 by 11, they have to figure it out themselves. But that's what the graphic scale is for. So this is in the template like this. The view itself, if you were to come through and name this, notice I've just stopped the line just after the scale. If this is a really long name to it, then you would just extend the line to meet with that. We've also been discussing instead of just having them numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, doing the grid coordinates because we have it on the title block. So here in the lower right-hand corner, we have A and 1. And we've been discussing, I don't know that anything has been confirmed, yes.
I wouldn't do it. Is that you that wants to do it? Yeah. I mean, because as soon as you start to move stuff around, you're going to find you're checking drawings going, God darn it.
Did you do that already?
Oh, God darn it.
Yep.
I wouldn't do
3,
it.
6, 4, 8. It's all over the place.
Yeah,
unless
that's
you
true.
remember to do it, it's a mess.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just
And it's Revit, so if we renumbered it automatically.
automatically does it. I
So,
don't
I
know.
mean, we don't need to worry about that.
Well, no, the issue is just you're going to end up with N12 and N14. So,
I personally like starting at the bottom right, going 1, 2, 3, just moving across.
so we're on 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm not a proponent for the grid. I mean, unless you're on like a 30 by 42 sheet where you've got 48 little plan details on there, I think going 1, 2, 3, 4 is just fine.
So for just for what it's worth, I did used to number them using Condoc. I would number them N12 or whatever. But Architectural Desktop let me create a view title that actually knew where it was on the sheet. I set up a way for the view title as you move it around, it would pick up coordinates on the sheet. So it would automatically number. It was pretty sweet. Can't do that with Revit.
So are you saying we're switching to architectural desktop?
You know, don't tempt me, man. Don't tempt me. Do we have graphic scale? No problem. You remember? No problem. How many years did it take us to get graphic scale?
Two-
And then
2
it's
years.
not from Revit. It's
Yeah.
from third party.
Third-party software, right?
Yeah.
So just to play devil's advocate here, why if we've been required to put our scale on all the drawings anyway, why do we even have the graphic scale still there?
Because people, well, for starters, we're required to have the graphic scale there too. U of M and other big
Oh,
companies
okay.
want a graphic scale.
That's simple.
The reason they want a graphic scale is if you shrink the sheet down,
Mm-hmm.
that 1/8 inch no longer applies. Also, we get jokers that'll print it from PDF and do their takeoffs. And this has happened. They order the material and they say that they're short on material. I don't get what happened. You printed it using print to fit to whatever printer you had.
Right, they'll print
And
to
it
fit.
didn't scale, and you used an 1/8 inch scale, and the drawing wasn't 1/8 inch. So that's happened before too. Not just us, to everybody around the world. I mean, that's, you just get guys doing it. So it's kind of a fail safe, just to sort of say, hey, you know what? We had a scale on there. You should check the scale. You're fine.
Okay.
While we're talking about the titles, I've noticed that, like on the plans, a lot of the titles are on the left side of the plan. And I was always taught, you do it on the right side. Everything should be to the right because that's the way you open the sheets.
But who taught you that?
I don't know,
Was
school.
it Hobbs and Black?
School, jobs, I don't know, I'd always done it that way everywhere I was.
I was say it was Hobbs and Black. We don't even talk about that. No, I agree with you. Because if you take an extreme case where you've got
Wait, so I just want to call it, you slam it, but then you agree with it?
well, no, I'm slapping Hobbs and Black, but even a broken clock is very twisted. But the idea of it being, if it's off to the left, it could get caught in the binding. That's the whole reason for starting from the right hand side. Is just you're keeping things away from the binding.
Okay, so I mean, I think that's the question. Are we going to start doing it on the right? Leave it on the left?
Too bad we don't write from right to left. We write from left to right. As your title goes, you gotta keep moving your damn thing over. So I don't really think I care. Whatever you guys want to do. 6 of one, half dozen of another. As far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, but I think it needs to be consistent.
Let's ask Aaron. I don't care. Aaron, you want titles? Here, you tell Aaron what you want.
Do you want the view title? Do you want it on the left of the view or the right of the view?
Left.
Wait. Hobbs and Black always did it on the left.
On the right.
On the right.
On the right, that's what I meant.
Definitely good on the left.
For those who can't see Aaron's response, he smiled.
I've always done it on the left too.
Okay, so
Sorry, Aaron.
barring Rob's, the other principal's response,
Well, I'm neutral, so if there's.
Andrew's neutral.
Then we have a
Andrew's
problem.
Switzerland.
Right. Which, knowing the mantra and how it goes with the principles, Rob will want it on the right, and Aaron on the left. Andrew's neutral. So.
No, I am, I'm a lefty.
Are we extending the line or are we not extending the line? I've seen they've done both as well, where it goes all the way
I
across.
like extending the line myself, but.
Sorry to open up that can of worms.
I like extending the line too.
I just I finally got used to extending the line. It
I
just stopped,
yeah.
So I don't know.
I don't like extending the line because when you're looking at details, it's just like more lines coming across. And I've seen them where the view title is so close to the detail that it looks like it's like something beyond, almost. I don't know.
Maybe you need to draw your details better.
All right. So no more Revit help for Charlie.
Eric,
And that is also
Sorry, I think
Charlie
Eric,
Diaz.
Eric Woners, having it on the left been a problem? Has it caused issues? Or your work?
No.
Other than his OCD.
And I respect that, for real. Like, I do respect the.
I just was always taught everything's to the right. You try and put everything to the right because that's the way you open the drawings.
But I think part of that comes from the bigger drawings, and bigger drawings, that's more important.
That's
If we
true.
are saying we're an 11x17 office, it's not as big a deal, it's easier to flip through that.
But where that title is just ridiculous to
But
me.
then, you know what's funny about that, about what you just described? The damn drawing key, the actual number is not in the lower right.
Right.
It's on the left of the, so that's kind of weird. And when you're trying to do the context, you kind of want your number to be on the lower right and then have your title come off from there, or be on the lower left and have your title come off from there. One or the other. So if wherever your key is, that should be in the corner. All right. So if we do what you're talking about, we got to flip it around, man. See what kind of problem that causes? Dogs and cats.
He's been here like 2 months and all he's
What's the
trying to
line
do.
from? What's that line from?
Dogs and cats.
What if we just
That's
put it,
hysteria.
what if we just put it all vertically and then it'll all just be on the bottom?
Of course, it comes up with Matt. Thank you.
Just rotate. We'll go
I would expected Matt to go. We don't need view
Style.
titles.
Right.
I know what it is.
Floor, roof, floor, it's
It's a
rotated
thing.
45 degrees.
Come on.
Okay, so are we saying we're leaving it on the left?
Yes.
We're leaving it numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4.
For right now, Eric will continue to fight that battle.
So
But
would you?
And are we extending the line?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's the only way they can find the title.
Okay, that turned
We won that.
into a little bit more conversation than just showing you that now it includes this,
So
and it's based off of that text over here.
can I ask the question again of, we're supposed to print most of our stuff at 11x17, why it's set up, the actual scale that it says is gonna be wrong 90% of our drawings?
Because when we're printing for cities, for contractors, for U of M, and they want it on the large format, the PDFs that we're sending out have to be set up for the large format. That way, as things are being printed, and we're not having to maintain 2 templates with 2 libraries with different sizes.
I ask because the majority of the stuff that I will be printing will be more so for users and facility people to look at, which will be 11x17, then I will be printing sets for cities and states.
So Charlie wants his,
Well, but
And they do, and it throws them off completely because they don't know how to use it.
Well,
right.
but the argument comes in, is it that we stay with the 11x17 and 16th inch text format and then provide scale up when we need to? But the issue becomes being able to scale up and send out CAD files now at twice the scale, export from Revit at twice the scale, right? Because if you're exporting from Revit for...
Yep.
so on Charlie's projects, it'll be on 22x34 title block, but it'll say scale is for 11x17.
There you go. Yeah, you know how to change that, Charlie. You can edit the family.
I'll use whatever you put in front of me and tell me to use. I don't really care. Just
sounds like you do.
What
My,
if it's 24 by
it
36?
just doesn't, it
It's all
doesn't
block for
make
that.
sense to me, and I'm just wondering, that's why I asked. Not because I needed it changed, it just makes no sense to me that I print everything with the wrong scale.
Right. The short answer is because scaling up and sending out to consultants and for prints after the fact is more work than doing everything large and just having a text on the title block that says it's for 22 by 34. We had for the longest time. We had 11 by 17.
Recommendation is if you're sitting in that seat right now, I would, if I were you, basically say, I don't care what the hell you guys want me to do with that effing scale. I would not.
Well, but I'm supposed to be taking the role of the proponent between what the principals are telling me and setting up the library.
What do you think, Mark, personally?
We had for the longest time everything at 16th inch text, right? 11 by 17. And we were running into issues and problems where we had projects then that were being dictated to us had to be on the large format prints. You know, McLaren is one of them. That it was everything being sent out was on the large
Everything U of M.
and everything U of M. Large formats, meaning everything that we're sending to MA to have them do the MAP drawings and everything like that. As we're exporting from Revit, everything wasn't meshing, right? All of our views, everything else. And so it was always ending up that we were having to maintain two libraries. We had an 1/8 inch text template with the information, we had a 16th inch. And then you begin to have where me being a doofus would update something in the 16th and forget to do it in the 8th, or it was just twice the amount of work and twice the amount of time. So because of that, we went this method of saying we have the one template, the one standard, the one size at 22 by 34, because in order to go down, it's just simply printing at 50%. Going up was creating a lot more issues and a lot more work. So yes, 90% of the jobs and projects that we're doing, we're still in 11 by 17 office, but the Revit-wise has to be set up that way in the computer so that we can, at those moments that we have to do the 22 by 34, we're prepared to do so without the additional work. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Can we get a full-size plotter?
Yeah, so I can, we have 3 of them in storage. I'm gonna bring one into the other room.
Okay.
But again, all we're talking
That's not
about
gonna
is,
solve it.
all we're talking about is some text.
Every other job, firm, how many firms do 11 by 17? You can probably name them on, your 2 hands. Out of everybody, everybody's doing full size, and it's not a problem on any other firm with any other construction. It's only apparently the doofuses you're working with. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's not a problem anywhere else, so I don't know what the issue is.
The issue is the less confusion you have at a table when you put a drawing down and you're trying to get 10 people to understand the same thing, and someone reads the scale and goes, well, that's a lot bigger than it looks.
That sounds like it always is, isn't it?
No, not if you have a drawing where all the text is correct. So if I can print a full-size plot of the main drawing I need for a meeting and all the text is correct, then I don't have to deal with that issue.
But when you always have,
No, if I
Print
take the
half
11
size.
by 17, the text is wrong.
but not even 11 by 17, like in the past, you brought half-size sets to every meeting you've gone to.
No. Not with the text drawings, either the graphic scale was right or the text was right.
No, I'm talking like at house.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't bring full-size drawings
Yes.
with you everywhere.
Yes. You can take half-size drawings, people couldn't read them. At a table of 10 people, no
Oh,
one
yeah,
could read
yeah,
that.
yeah, I know what Charlie's talking about from a different angle than you're talking about, because
Yeah.
Charlie's talking about, I need to be able to bring a progress set with me, throw it down on a page and have a working session with a bunch of people to lay out the plan. It's a different use. You're doing CDs, your check sets are for you, so of course you're not gonna have a problem, you know what the scale is. He's dealing with a bunch of doctors and physicians that don't know, they think they know everything, but they don't know everything. So what he needs to be able to do is have a plotter so he can print something, take it to an effing meeting and throw it down on the table.
Let's get some custom
And I don't-
scales printed up.
And I don't need like the
Let's
full
go
set.
scale.
I just wanna be able to print like the main drawing I'm gonna use, that
Yeah.
everyone's gonna stare at, and have everything on it be right, because the less confusion, you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about, and I actually agree, you do need a plotter. I mean, but John needs a plotter. I mean, there's times when everybody wants to be able to just print something in color for design. It's more of a design process thing than, you know, an internal drawing development thing. So, but that's a different story. I mean, the fact that we have a 22 by 34 standard sheet size and it's half-size set, and I mean, people get half-size sets all the time, as JB's saying. So from a construction progress perspective, dealing with contractors, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's the other side
It's a
of it.
design process issue, yeah. I agree.
And so I think, okay, we're using that scale. It makes sense for, now we have one standard, half the work to keep everything updated for all the various different kinds of clients. That all makes perfect sense. I just think the one issue I see is if the only way we can print, there's errors on the drawing is the way I look at it. I realize if you read 6 different things, it tells you what's right. That causes a lot of confusion in a meeting. And so just to be able to print a full-size drawing so everything is correct can eliminate a lot of hassle when you're working with a group of people.
When you got 10 people around the table, at least one of those people are going to screw something up, and they're going to mix it up, and they're looking at 11 by 17. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I agree.
Yeah. Case in point, today's lunch light training.
Title block stays the way it is. It's just a matter of let's have the tools that we need, knowing that this is our standard.
Is there any merit
Cover all the bases.
to putting in the title block, or I'm sorry, in the view title, not the title block, to putting the scale label and then putting at 22 by 34?
Yeah, so the problem with that, which is where we were originally discussing having it, was right here after the text saying at 22 by 34 is, it's not always. What if you're printing on 30 by 42 or printing on 8.5 by 11
So that
or
means
printing
you have to
on,
have different view titles for each of the different sheet sizes, and you got to remember what sheet size you're in, Steve.
and
We talked about
and
doing
also
this, but I don't wanna do it.
we've already seen it. It's something. It's another thing that someone has to remember to do. So when you have it set to 3/16, and this graphic scale isn't working on this one, but it gives you those weird numbers, the 1'4" and the 2'8", and people forget to go back and switch this one to the 3 over.
Hey,
You
I
know,
got
that's
another-
a switch that
I got a
forgets to
question.
happen.
Since we're trying to do parametric, this thing is pissing me the F off. Come on, tell me this graphic scale isn't pissing you guys off. What if, okay, just bear with me. What if you just stuck a graphic scale in the actual damn view? You just stuck a graphic scale bar. I'm just throwing this out there just because, and we just go back to the damn, just the view title that friggin' worked. And we just stick a bar scale right in the view so that it scales with the actual view. It's a separate element.
But then you have like 40.
We can do it on
If
every.
you have a sheet of details, you have a
But
graphic scale on every one of those.
I don't know. It would be an annotation thing,
Well,
right?
so two things with that. One is it wouldn't be parametric.
It won't scale with the view. It's inside the model space.
Right, but the only way this admin works is it's a view title. So
But I'm talking bar scale.
With no numbers? Just a
Yeah,
bar
right. You'd have to
scale.
click on it. Well, you'd do the same damn process. You have to click on it and tell it this is 8 inches square inch. Right.
Right.
It's not parametric.
So
Okay,
it's not
there's no
parametric.
benefit. Never
the
mind.
other issue is it would still look the exact same no
All right,
matter
never
what
mind.
scale you're at because it's an annotation element.
Never mind. But I'm going on the record that I think this bar scale is a pain in the ass.
We could just have no scale listed and let them figure it out.
I would love that much more.
Here's your drawing, leave me alone, go figure it out.
Here's your scale. Figure it out.
All right. Well, we
Your
chased.
6 feet
Check
wide.
it
They
door.
got box scale.
Our standard is 3 foot always.
All right. So we chased that rabbit. We didn't really kill it, but we strangled it. We had a couple of other rabbit holes we chased down.
Still ran away.
Going back to, so I'm just trying to pull this to a close here. Material takeoffs, kind of any questions about that or schedules, process. Definitely want to make sure that you're not agreeing to anything if a contractor calls up and says, hey, can you give me this information without talking to the project manager or the principals. And then the view title that's here. Leaving it to the view title. Any questions about this or the wordage, or if someone goes, oh, that sounds weird to say.
So that's in the template right now, so I can
So
transfer that.
this
into-
is in the template. So with the view titles, that's what you want to make sure you're doing for your active projects right now, is just open up a new project, go back to yours, transfer project standards, just the view titles, and it'll update them because they're all named the same to get that written text in there. And then you'll have to make sure that you bring in the title block, or if you have one that you've already customized for your project and stuff, just add this text to the title block. And then the board for ideas and stuff. So as you come across, we need to be more vocal on what you need. So if you're working on a project and you create something, at this point, especially if they're detail items, you should be saving everything into the purgatory folder in the library, not the project families folder. Project families folder is for those families that are very specific to that project. Everything else we should be saving into purgatory.
I have a question about the wording there. Since I know we're 22 by 34, but that gets printed on 24 by 36, would there be any confusion about that? Since we're listening.
Yeah, absolutely will be, and I saw that come from Mark. We should tell them we want to print it 22 by 34, because then our border looks really weird.
It's an extra.
But then ours, everybody else is printing 24 by 36, like all the consultants. So then our sheets would be smaller than
Why?
their sheet.
They should have ours title block. Don't you think?
Yeah. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, no, you're right, because unless you specifically say 22 by 34, the printer's going to print it on 24 by 36 sheet.
Which you can get 22-inch and 34-inch rolls just as easy as you can get 24 and 36-inch rolls. That's what we bought for our plotter all the time. In fact, I ordered them from Repro. They would bring them over, so I knew they had them.
Well, the issue is more getting your sheets same size as the consultants.
Is that an issue though? Like every time I've ever ordered prints, and I always say 22 by 34, and it always comes from ARC at 22 by 34. Is it the consultant sheets in particular?
I was just asking a question.
It did happen on Legacy 1 with the side, but I think they fixed it since then, but they printed 22 by 34 on 24 by 36 sheet.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
They
it has happened.
They center 22 by 34 on 24
Yeah.
by 36.
Oh, well,
That's
that's pretty.
And that was-
That's a pretty quick fix. If you really had to do it, you could do that in Bluebeam pretty quickly.
Or you should put that.
I'm not worried about our PDFs. I'm worried about the printing in somebody.
The physical.
The physical.
The physical print is easy. You just tell ARC print 22 by 34. I can call them up, or Cindy can call them and tell them always do 22 by 34 for us, and just make that a policy, so that you guys, if you forget, they'll do it.
But I think
Is there any reason that would be a problem?
No, but I don't think that's the issue. If it's printed 22 by 34, that works. But if all the consultant's drawings for a job are coming 24 by 36, and we are gonna print ours centered on 24 by 36, so they're all the same size, does that note become confusing?
Yes, but that's why the consultants should have the same title block that we do. They shouldn't be sending them 22 by 34 to us. Or excuse me, they shouldn't be sending 20 by 36, they should be sending 22 by 34.
Okay.
If your consultants are working on a different title block, that's a problem. And if they're scaling our title block up, that's another problem.
Well, like for Plum Market, we weren't in control of the contract for the equipment vendor, and so his drawings are 24 by 36.
That's a
And we
special case.
couldn't make them change.
Right. Well, you could.
So what if we just change this from 22 by 34 drawing size to 22 by 34 title block? Because then if it ends up on larger paper or whatnot, it's at least you're describing the title block.
Title block is an inch short.
Oh, that's right, title block short.
I mean, the magic of the 22 by 34 is that it scales down perfectly to 11 by 17. That's why we want to go 22 by 34. U of M standard, I think, John, JB, is 22 by 34 as
Yes.
well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
For the same reason.
yeah, for the very same reason.
I just asked a question.
So, I say we just, if you get a case like that, Charlie, not a problem.
I'm
The
fine
entire-
with it.
The entire set, our consultants, we deliver a 22 by 34 product.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine. I have no issue with that, but I heard that issue, and I know that it has happened on a couple
Yeah,
of
like a
projects.
contractor goes
since
to
I've been
order
here.
prints and overlooks it and just says, "Oh, I'm gonna order prints 24 by 36." Just thinks that that's the standard. So that's
Yeah.
all.
But the other,
That's
the
a,
other good
that's a
part
once
about
in
that
a
is,
100, but you know.
if he orders 24 by 36 prints and they print them the wrong scale, we do say on here that our drawings are supposed to be 22 by 34.
Yep.
So that's good. I mean, if he sends it to some local printer or doesn't use ARC or anybody that knows, like really, and he says 24 by 36 and they just scale it on there, we have ourselves covered
Yeah.
in
So-
multiple ways.
One thing that I used to have, so that title lock was something that I did after I left Smith Cooper, that had a double line. I don't even remember why the hell I did it. It's kind of cheesy, but those were supposed to be 1-inch increments. We doubled it up and we lost that. The A, B, C, those are all 1 inch.
2 inches
At
for the
11 by 17, it was 1 inch. Right? So like you could literally scale it when you're on an 11 by 17 sheet, and you'd know that it was 1 inch. And we could double them up, make it, put them back to 1 inch. You can even, I've seen some firms, maybe I stop by, some firms did this where these were actually like just tick marks, and they'd have 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. And then you knew exactly how big it was. That's another possibility. Then you don't have to worry about that. You can see right there that the whole sheet is a graphics too. Anyways, Ed had us put on there a note with a line, like a little dimension that said, this line or something to that effect is 1 inch at proper scale. If it's not, something or other.
It's not, you're screwed.
So we used to have that in the title block a while ago. Remember that, Mark? You were up here when we had that.
Yeah.
And that was the exact same. That was the exact same problem. People printing with the wrong scale. Sorry.
I'm just curious to see who's still in here. No. That's too late. Alright. Okay,
I
well,
think what we got now is good enough to keep going.
yeah. Yeah, it lists it on the title block, calls it, the attention's there, liability has been shifted. Okay, all right, thank you, everybody.